Hello, JDs and gentlemen. Welcome to, my house. Don't ask how you got here or why you're tied up. I want to talk about Fifth Cell, because I genuinely don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about Fifth Cell. So they were founded in 2003 by two guys. There was Jeremiah Slozka, I think it's Slozka, and Marius Fullbush. They started by making mobile games for publishers like THQ, who eventually went out of business, I believe, Jamdat Mobile, who eventually became EA Mobile, so similarly not a great situation, and a former subsidiary of Square Enix called UI Evolution, who I forgot to do further research on before recording the video. RIP. However, after about a year, in 2004, THQ announced that they would be publishing Fifth Cell's first original games. There were 3 of these mobile, I think Nokia games. There was Siege, there was SEAL Team 6, and there was Mini Poccha. I think it's Poccha? Doesn't look like Poccha, I think it's Poccha. I found copies of these games online through Internet Archive with emulators. I could not get them working, though. There are links in the description to that. If I forgot them, tell me. But if you can get them working, please let me know. I would love to check them out. They did continue making licensed games from about 2004 to 2006, but around the tail end of that timeline, they started transitioning to development for the Nintendo DS. Though Wikipedia does say that they were planning to do PSP games, I could not actually find a source for that. So, Drawn to Life released for the Nintendo DS during September of 2007 in the US, EU, and in Australia, and then it came to Japan and Korea in December of that same year. It's an action platformer with a unique system that allows you to draw things into the world, like various platforms, switches, weapons, even your entire character. It's honestly really just technically impressive. The plot of the game is fairly simple on the surface. The creator, who drew everything in the world, has abandoned their creations, including the fox-like Raposa, after the Book of Life was filled with scribbles, creating corrupted shadows by a Raposa named Wilfrey. One by one, the Raposa have all been abandoning the village that they live in. However, the daughter of the mayor, Mari, has managed to convince the creator to provide a hero who can bring the Raposa back, as well as who can also stop the shadowy forces of Wilfrey that are kind of just slowly covering the world in that, gunky black shadow. I would really love to go more in depth with the game, but number 1, this video would be several hours long if I did, and number 2, it's actually the first Let's Play I ever did on the channel. So, if you want to watch really old content with bad editing and poor audio balancing, go ahead, I guess. I'll keep it brief. It's an alright game. You have to explore decently large levels in order to find the 3 missing Raposa along with the 4 pages of the Book of Life, or 4 parts of the page of the Book of Life that you're hunting down. The gameplay's decent, but sometimes it's a little bit obnoxious where you have to, search through every inch of the level to find all these collectibles, and it makes a lot of the secrets feel kind of pointless. The platforming is a little bit slippery sometimes, and I'm sure you'll be surprised, water levels suck in this game. A lot. They're actually pretty terrible. That being said, after release, Drawn to Life received mixed and average reviews on Metacritic and was actually nominated for several awards: Outstanding Achievement in Story Development, and Handheld Game of the Year, even winning the Most Innovative Design Award from IGN, among a number of others. It sold hundreds of thousands of units, and overall was a great first outing for Fifth Cell. The next year, they released a real-time strategy tower defense game called Locke's Quest. You play as an Arcaneer in training, one half architect, one half engineer, who's been pulled into a war after an army of clockwork soldiers attack his hometown. It's separated into 2 phases. In the build phase, you have a limited amount of time and resource to build walls and turrets, and in the battle phase, you have to hold out for a set amount of time against these clockworks, maintaining your defenses, helping them fight off the robots, and occasionally just trying to punch them because once that timer ticks down, instead of the clockworks arriving to fight you, they all break down and collapse. I'm a really big fan of the game. It's got a great balance with some pretty difficult stages that require you to switch out your plans from day to day, rather than relying on the one universal correct opinion. The story is also pretty interesting, though I have no idea how can I actually explain it succinctly without spoiling major plot twists, like how is actually secretly
Bubble, you can't say that.
Critics say that the plot was a bit cliché, standard fare, but was astonishingly mature and kept the game moving well. Although now that I've said that out loud, I'm not entirely sure if it keeps the game moving is actually that much of a compliment. Anyway, others stated that while it was astonishingly good, it only became properly fascinating around the midpoint, which I do agree with. I think that the last stretch of the game is the most interesting story-wise. The DS game was very well received, called one of the most original, inspired, and entertaining experiences by IGN. Although it was noted by a few other reviewers that the controls were occasionally, finicky and fussy, and that Locke's pathfinding could be kind of poor at times. Which I do agree with. I've probably lost a few days in the game because I just, couldn't walk to a wall. I do want to note that the soundtrack and sprite work were phenomenal and got a ton of praise, but I'm not going to say that about every single 5th Cell game, because it 100% would be true, and you'd get tired of hearing me say it. As a note, before I move on, by the way, there is a port of the game that came out in 2017 for PC, Xbox One, and PS4. It removed the DS compressions, and it seems to force touchscreen controls, for better or for worse. It received mostly negative reviews since they changed basically nothing about it, meaning that all of the quirks that made the DS game interesting are now awkward and, weird control methods, where you have to, be zooming a little cursor all over the place. You can't really remove it from the DS without it not being as good, so PC port looks gorgeous. I'm gonna stick with the DS version. After the release of Locke's Quest, IGN interviewed Jeremiah in 2008, asking what games he wanted to be known for. In short, he stated that he wanted to make games that you couldn't find anywhere else, the sorts of games that only 5th Cell could provide to them. So far, that's been held up pretty well. You know, before I started doing research for this video, I had actually thought that Scribblenauts was the first 5th Cell game. That aside, okay, so, Jeremiah Slokza had an idea for a puzzle game that would allow you to solve puzzles with basically Mad Libs, where you would be just given template sentences and fill in the blank spots, you know? Did anyone ever play that game? I actually never played it as a kid, but apparently it's popular. Anyway, Marius Fulbush, the 5th Cell lead technical director, created an engine called ObjectNot. A significant number of nouns were researched given various traits and properties, and then put into the ObjectNot database. Supposedly, there were a total of 22,802 unique items in the ObjectNot database. Jeremiah stated that number was leaked by a hacker who, quote, didn't know anything, end quote, and that it was significantly more than that. You may have guessed by now that the ObjectNot engine became the game that we're talking about in this section, Scribblenauts, which released for the DS in 2009. The plot of Scribblenauts is incredibly simple. Yeah, as it turns out, there's basically no plot here. You're Maxwell, some kid with a magic notebook and the power to create any object you'd like, as long as it is not trademarked, a proper noun, or something profane. It even allows, homonyms and memes, as long as those memes are from 2009. Levels are pretty simple. They're just side-scrolling platformer puzzlers, where you are presented with a starite when you complete the level, and allers for making new words and completing levels under par, and for, getting little achievements called merits. Each level has a number, and making less objects than that number grants you bonus allers, the par that I mentioned a moment ago. In reviews, everyone was actually pretty impressed by it. They stated that it definitely isn't the be-all, end-all, ultimate video game of all time, but it was pretty enjoyable thanks to the personal challenge of trying different words for different puzzles. There was a ton of replayability for it, honestly. Some people complained about the touchscreen-based controls, and I think that they were much better than being forced to swap between the touchscreen and the D-pad whenever you wanted to type something out on the touchscreen keyboard. A month after Scribblenauts released, Drawn to Life the Next Chapter released on DS. I'm specifying DS because that will be important later. Anytime I talk about Drawn to Life the Next Chapter, assume it's the DS one. It took the gameplay of the first entry and narrowed each level down to focus on reaching a goal at the end of the level. With a couple of secrets hidden off to the side, I think that it handles that a lot better. And it introduced a number of other really good features, such as an expanded character creator, with a ton more colors, the ability to decrease or increase the length and number of limbs on your hero. You can have 4 arms, you can have a tail, you could have arms that are shorter than your neck. It's great! Then there are these action draw rooms, where you get to draw just these simple little platformers to make it through a slightly tougher than usual platforming puzzle. I think they're pretty neat. And, to top all of that off, there are 3 total forms that your hero can take. There is the Blob, which slips through small cracks and can envelop enemies to become temporarily invincible. There's a Spider, which can climb walls, swing on webs, and stop enemies in their tracks, even midair, by just shooting webs at them. But the hero form is the most versatile one. It's the only one that can swim through water. It is the best one to deal with platforming in most fights, even if most major fights are just kind of jump on a guy or hit him with a sword in some variety, more accurately. Then, the plot is also more complicated. Wilfrey is back, he's drained the color from the world, kidnapped a ton of villagers, and has thrown them all over the world, which is almost completely unexplored to this little village of Raposa. Your hero and the Raposa travel the world and try to fix things, from splotches of color, villages with no leaders, and all sorts of other interesting problems. Honestly, I think that Drawn to Life the Next Chapter for the Nintendo DS is significantly better than the original one in nearly every single way. Oddly, in most of the reviews that I've seen, people liked this less than the original. I would wager that that's just the novelty that, oh yeah, well, we've been able to draw things. We can draw things. We did that in the last game. I think that the novelty has worn off a good bit. I think that this game is just way better, and we're going to follow suit with that with the next 5th Cell game. So how would you follow up on a game like Scribblenauts? I feel like the answer is pretty obvious. I would just add adjectives to the nouns that you can already spawn in. So instead of spawning in a jetpack or wings every time you want to fly, you might create a hovering handheld monkey, or a tiny weeping UFO, or you might just make a polka-dotted winged flying bathtub. If you need a weapon, you don't just always make a sword. You could make a gigantic metallic electric sword, or a minuscule dwarven blunt gun. It's great, and it's so stupid in the best of ways. They also added a much more complex level editor, and even a hint system which unlocks over time, or just you can spend allers on it to skip the wait. And just like Drawn to Life the Next Chapter, it takes the original game and expands on it, refining the levels, refining gameplay itself. Except for the plot department. Except for the final level, for some reason, Maxwell is chasing down an evil doppelganger and shooting starites at him? I don't get that. Anyway, critics found the game to be better than the original. With refined controls, the entire adjective system was amazing. Though some people seemed to agree that the game was a lot easier than the original one. For some reason, also, GameSpot specifically stated that they disliked the lack of real-world logic, and I do think that they entirely missed the point there. Scribblenauts Unlimited released for the 3DS, the Wii U, and on Windows in 2012, mobile in 2015, and then in 2018 it got ported to the Switch, Xbox One, and PS4 with some expanded content. As an all-time first in the series, the game actually has a plot. There's a pair of explorers who met, fell in love, and had 42 children, with Maxwell and his twin sister Lily being the youngest. They were spoiled with a pair of magical gifts, Maxwell's notebook, which lets him create anything he wants at all, and Lily's globe, which lets her travel anywhere in the world. In order to prevent them from turning into spoiled little brats, they're sent out to explore the world and get some experience. They stumble onto an old man, and Maxwell plays a prank on him, giving him a rotten apple when he asks for something to eat. The old man casts some kind of spell and calls them spoiled little brats, and vanishes. When Maxwell goes to walk away, Lily's legs have turned to stone. Luckily, the oldest brother of the family, Edwin, lives nearby, and he teaches Maxwell about starites. They're a manifestation of joy, and so Maxwell has to travel the world and help people solve, like, weird, kind of simple, kind of complicated problems in order to get full starites in, like, a regular style of level, or you have, like, these big sandbox areas that you play through, where you can solve smaller problems, like tourists being upset that it's too cloudy to see a mountain, or a shark who is upset because he's a vegetarian and can't find anything to eat. And if you solve those small problems, you get starite shards. 5 starite shards gives you 1 starite. Additionally, the biggest change, I think, to the game is that you are actually able to apply adjectives to pre-existing objects. Once again, the game got very high reviews. Critics praised it for engaging gameplay and creativity, even if the difficulty was pretty low. It's also worth noting that some people claimed that the game didn't make the game, like, worth it to be inventive. Which, like, okay, yeah, there's no real reason to not always use the same object, but I think that the humor of solving the problem with babies with various adjectives is significantly funnier than just solving the problem the correct way. So, when I first saw Scribblenauts Unmasked, a DC Comics adventure releasing in 2013, I was kinda confused. Like, why would they go from, like, a really interesting world to, like, a crossover licensed game? Especially considering the fact that most licensed games are usually not very good historically. I have absolutely no idea, still. I could not find any interviews about Fifth Cell explaining why they did this, though that might be because this was actually Fifth Cell's final game.
Yes.
The game plays a lot like Scribblenauts Unlimited, although it does allow you to summon any and every character that existed in Detective Comics at the time, which is honestly insane. There's so much stuff there. The plot is that Maxwell and Lily used Maxwell's notebook and Lily's globe to create and travel to Gotham City to see if Batman or Superman was better. However, upon arriving, Lily's globe is shattered and all the starites that apparently power it are lost. What makes things even worse is that Maxwell's doppelganger has also shown up and has aligned himself with the DC Comics villains like Lex Luthor and the Joker. This game has the most in-depth plot of the series, with several major antagonists, a number of really interesting plot twists, and character development in a number of different layers. I am shocked that a licensed game has a good plot. Scribblenauts Unmasked, a DC Comics adventure, uses almost the exact same general gameplay as Scribblenauts Unlimited, with the large levels, small side quests, and major missions that give you a starite after completing them. However, the side quests give you reputation, which is the currency used to unlock new levels, instead of starites were, like the previous games. You also get reputation for making new words, and repeating words can reduce the reputation you get on the missions. Additionally, there's a really interesting mechanic where the 5th dimensional trickster imp, Mr. Mixelpidlick, will occasionally show up and offer you a weird challenge, like everything's a zombie, or if you reuse any words, you don't get any more reputation until you reset the level, or you can only use DC characters,
and so on and so forth.
And usually the reward for playing along is that he'll double your reputation. Critics enjoyed the game, but it received mixed reviews, ultimately. Critics said that it was mostly just enjoyable for, like, nerds of the DC universe, which I really do agree with on this one. It feels like there's a lot of fan service for specifically DC, and as somebody who has barely ever engaged with DC out of, like, the 1960s series, My Adventures with Superman, and those little, like early reader kids picture books that I found at the library when I was like 8, I do agree there's a lot of fan service that went over my head. There's 3 more little things I want to talk about real quick. Run Roo Run was a 2012 mobile game where you played as a mother kangaroo running through Australia to find her Joey.
Hey everyone, Future back here. I actually found more information on this game. I originally said that it seemed to play like Mario Run. I had not been able to find any actual screenshots to back it up. As it turns out, gameplay consists of a lot of little screens with various objects to interact with, making up for short, one-screen platformer puzzles.
IGN praised it for being simple but like interesting and challenging as it develops and expands on a lot of these single-screen platforming bits. But Edge magazine gave it a more mixed review, saying that it followed Fifth Cell's recent traditions of strong ideas, erratic level design, and structural weaknesses. I don't really know what they're talking about with that one, to be totally honest. It seems like the previous games have been pretty solid. Hybrid was an Xbox Live Arcade game from the same year that used Valve's Source Engine. It is a third-person shooter about harvesting dark matter after Australia was destroyed and aliens invaded Earth. I can't find a whole lot on it, but it seems to have gotten mixed to average reviews. Castlehold was a PvP strategy game released on Steam for early access on Windows in 2021. It seems to have been a pretty run-of-the-mill free-to-play game. Some, deck-building elements, it looks like, though some reviews do note that it's rather shallow, boring, and not particularly well-tested. It also hasn't been getting updates in the last 4 years, likely because Fifth Cell was closed. We'll talk about that later, though. For now, let's talk about some of the spin-offs made by other groups. So back in 2008, on the DS, Ultron released Drawn to Life SpongeBob SquarePants Edition. This game acts as a sequel to the SpongeBob episode Frankendoodle, where the clumsy artist drops 2 pencils into Bikini Bottom, and Patrick draws Doodle Bob again, trying to remember what he's not supposed to draw. Doodle Bob then takes the other pencil and uses it to cause havoc in Bikini Bottom, and so SpongeBob and Patrick draw a hero, and Drawn to Life stuff happens. Overall, it feels kind of like a ROM hack of Drawn to Life. It got some average reviews. People seemed to like the gameplay, though it was called repetitive, and people said that it overstayed its welcome. Though reviewers did say that younger fans of SpongeBob would likely have a pretty good time with it. Drawn to Life: The Next Chapter on the Wii came out in 2009 by Planet Moon Studios. It is a non-canon spin-off to Drawn to Life, with a totally different plot from the DS game of the same title. According to Wikipedia, because I haven't actually played through the whole game, it is one of the very few first-party Fifth Cell games that I have not beaten, unfortunately. According to Wikipedia, it is about trying to stop Wilfrey from gathering artifacts to create Creation Ink that would let him erase the whole world and redraw it in his own image. It seemed to do alright in reviews and sales, but I really can't find much info on it, because there is a DS game with the exact same title that came out the exact same year, and so anytime I think that I found information on the Wii game, it's actually the DS game. And then finally, in 2011, Fifth Cell technically did work on this one, but that is because this is Scribblenauts Remix that was published by Iron Galaxy Studios, and it's basically just Super Scribblenauts with a couple of Scribblenauts levels and a couple of levels made by Iron Galaxy Studios. ported to iOS and Android. No real notes about this one, except I had a friend who I would sit with on the bus when I was in, like, middle school, who would play this. It seemed neat. It seemed like it worked pretty well. These next two games were cancelled, so we don't really have too much information on them. There was a mobile fighting RPG where you would summon nouns that would fight for you. Supposedly there was a closed beta of the game, but I haven't been able to find any footage or real info on it. From the few images that I found of the game, it would be a relatively plot-focused game, with Maxwell fighting off these mind-controlling bugs with the help of a magician named Mindy. I'm honestly pretty disappointed that this was cancelled, because I am easily impressed and really want to play this game. We know very little about Scribblenauts Worlds, but I was able to find this trailer that was playing in the background. It seems to focus less on writing and more on, spawning items from a menu. You would use them to fight off a zombie attack. It would have been a 3D action game, and was based on a more gritty art style, and it would have focused on a more mature audience. I think I probably would have liked to have played this too, but Fighting Words probably would have performed better. In 2015, Fifth Cell's game Anchors in Drift, which was a free-to-play action RPG, was put up to crowdfunding, but it failed to reach the goal and development stopped. In 2016, Scribblenauts Fighting Words was cancelled by Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment, and as a result, heavy layoffs reduced the company to only a tiny number of employees. Effectively, Fifth Cell was closed. In 2018, a new Scribblenauts game came out, by Shiver. I didn't talk about these two upcoming games previously, specifically because they weren't made by Fifth Cell, and they kind of relied entirely on the closure of Fifth Cell. But Scribblenauts Showdown, made in 2018 by Shiver, was a competitive party game where players created nouns to beat each other in Mario Party adjacent minigames. It received generally negative, mixed, or, at best, average reviews. Critics stated that Shiver had a lack of imagination and couldn't create a decent party game, despite how much the original Scribblenauts games gave for them to work with. Even the people who seemed to enjoy it claimed that it was repetitive and much of the game was hit or miss. I checked it out briefly at my local library, and it doesn't really work. It's got a sandbox mode, where you run around an area trying to collect starite shards, just like Unlimited, but there's no hints, you just kind of have to assume you know what's going on, which you probably won't, because it still uses some of the, wacky, weird logic every now and then. It just isn't great. In 2009, Jeremiah Slazka told IGN that Fifth Cell was planning on releasing a third Drawn to Life game as a launch title for a potential DS successor, though it never released. When THQ went bankrupt in 2013, they gave the rights of Drawn to Life to 505 Games, who didn't really do much with it for about 6 years. However, in October of 2020, a shining light amidst the darkness of the global pandemic released. In Taiwan, a rating site leaked a rating for a game called Drawn to Life 2 Realms. 1 month later, and 505 Games' French YouTube channel leaked the trailer for this game. I remember seeing both of these while I was sitting in my kitchen bored out of my mind during the pandemic. I was so excited. When I learned that the game would be releasing in December of 2020, I was absolutely ecstatic to see what it would bring. It was being developed by Digital Continue, which was made up of almost entirely former Fifth Cell members. Oh man, this game kinda sucks. It's not terrible. It's based on just these fairly simple little puzzle rooms, where in the story, you're using the Book of Imagination to jump between the real world and the Raposa world in order to clear out the influence of Aldark, the leader of the Shadows and the mastermind behind Wilfrey's Fall to Darkness. The gameplay is totally different from the original DS games. It doesn't have the original game's exploration focus, and it doesn't have the linear mission-like structure of Drawn to Life: The Next Chapter. Instead, like I mentioned earlier, each level is a puzzle room, where you place down enemies and items, called toys, to solve simple puzzles, like leading a person into a goal, or defeating a bunch of enemies, or doing other, like, weird little tasks. You don't really draw things in the world very much, and honestly, I think that the biggest problem with the game is, weirdly enough, that it's a drawn-to-life game. If this were a game where you play as a hero made out of imagination to save mankind from the darkness that exists within their own hearts, I think that it would have been a really good game. But I think that by giving it the drawn-to-life title, they set up certain expectations that it ultimately failed to reach. It barely got 50% in most review scores, and Nintendo Life summed it up best in saying that it fails to replicate what made the drawn-to-life game so compelling. I want to bring up the 3 games that Digital Continue made other than Drawn-to-Life 2 Realms. In 2018, they released Next Up Hero, which was a roguelike dungeon crawler online title. Every time you die, it would leave behind a ghost for other players to revive, functioning like an AI teammate. Honestly, pretty cool idea. Steam reviews put it as mixed. They called it hardcore for the sake of being hardcore. They said that it was repetitive and that it was decently fun with a few friends. Though, there was only online play, there was really no couch co-op, and it doesn't even really seem like there was an easy way to get your friends in on it. That September, they released a game called Jump Stream, with another really interesting idea. A platformer where the entire level is controlled entirely by your streaming audience. Honestly, I would love a game like that to play on Twitch or even here on YouTube. However, the game only actually worked with Mixer, which went down 5 years ago, 2 years after the game was launched. Most of the reviews are mixed, usually citing either the failure of Mixer or the fact that the game was kinda just filled with pay-to-win content, which is pretty rough, honestly. Their most recent title came out in 2021, Super Mash, only a month or so after Drawn-to-Life 2 Realms came out. It has an interesting framing sequence where you're the owner of an indie game store who found a magical game console, and you get to mix together different genres. So you can use it to create, like, a Metroidvania shmup, or a JRPG action platformer. There's also challenge mechanics, it's like flavored as like glitches in the game, and something about like collectible dev cards that I don't entirely get what those do. Again, really cool idea, not done particularly well. The mixed reviews cite subpar gameplay, repetitive goals, and a lot of really slow, boring segments. It seems like a lot of Digital Continue is all about really cool ideas and, unfortunately, really poor executions. Fifth Cell made some of my favorite games to play when I was younger, and honestly, even as an adult, I still love a lot of their original games. Lock's Quest and Drawn-to-Life: The Next Chapter are my 2 favorite DS games of all time, and both have some phenomenal plots. The executive producer of Drawn-to-Life 2 Realms, Joseph Tringali, has stated that he would like to remake the original Drawn-to-Life duology, and even make a 4th entry. 2 Realms received subpar sales and reviews that could, unfortunately, not even really be called positive by stretching the definition of the word. To my knowledge, there's been no news on this desire since 2020. Digital Continue has vanished almost entirely after the release of Super Mash. I tried joining their Discord and emailing both Fifth Cell and Digital Continue. I've gotten no responses at the time of writing this, and Digital Continue's Discord has been entirely abandoned and filled with just spam and absolute nothing. But I think that it's okay for a franchise to die, honestly. In the modern age, it seems like we have a habit of trying to just, like, extend everything, trying to keep every IP, everything alive forever, always asking for the next entry. But I think that it's okay to accept that Fifth Cell created some absolutely amazing games, but they're not doing that anymore. If anyone here watching works with Fifth Cell or works with Digital Continue, thank you for everything that you guys made. Quite literally, those DS games were some of my favorite games as a kid, and just thank you so much for making them. To those of you who came by to check this video out, thank you very much for coming. Sorry that it took so long. I had a lot more research to do than I expected to, honestly. I'm hoping to do more of this video style soon. But thank you very much for coming. And as always, I hope that you have a lovely morning, evening. And I'll see you again another time. Goodbye!